Good morning and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. Today we're learning about a brand new concept in Hasidus and Chabad philosophy. It's a prayer that we Jews make in the time of our distress. God, answer you. May the Lord God answer you on the day of distress. May the God of Yaakov fortify you. We say this pretty much every day in our prayers. May the Lord, may God Almighty answer you in the day of your distress. So it's a prayer that we Jews have been making for thousands of years. It was actually written by King David in chapter 20 of the book of Psalms. Now, we've got to crack this code in this prayer because apparently it works. If you think about it, the Jews have been through more distress, more persecution than pretty much any other nation on the face of this earth. And we've lived to tell the tale. We're still here. So clearly, it's working. And what we're going to do now is to dissect, to analyze, a deep dive into the meaning behind this prayer, chapter 20 of the book of Psalms. This verse is actually the second verse in chapter 20. I'm going to show you a picture of the author. This is the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. He's the 6th Rebbe of Chabad. He's the father-in-law of our Rebbe. And the book we're learning is from Hasidic Discourses. We're on page 261. What we're going to learn is that the previous Rebbe, this discourse was delivered in the early 1940s. Can you imagine? During the Holocaust, here in America, when the Jews were in extraordinary distress. This is the discourse that the previous Rebbe was sharing with us. And it's great to have you, Richard Greenspan, with us, all the way from Muskogee, Oklahoma. It all started right here. And everybody else that's with us here live and later. Great to study with you all. So, if you by the way, this book, you can actually find the book online. I wonder, let me see if I can quickly find it. To post it to our friends online.
There are 2 volumes of this.
Yeah. There's, and I think I just found it online. Yep, I think I just found it. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to post it into the comments section. Here it is. Okay, I just found it, and I'm going to post it now to the chat of this class. Okay, so there we go. So even in Oklahoma, Richard and Torchwood from Nashville, you'll be able to join us as well. Fantastic. Good. So here goes. What the previous Rebbe begins by telling us is that why are we turning to God anyways in the time of our distress? I mean, wouldn't you want to go to the source of your problem? Why are you going to God to solve your problem? Think about that. I mean, how do you explain this? The only reason you'd go to God is if God is the source of everything, including the problem. Now, that's a meditation right there. Like, one second, what? I thought he's my friend. Why is God putting me in this distress of this extreme suffering, persecution, war, trauma that I'm going through? This is going to be a mindset that we're approaching. The very moment that you're turning to God for your salvation means that God has the power to solve your problem. But the way that we're going to learn it now in Hasidus is that not only does God have the ability to override that your tormentor, but what we're going to learn is that God actually is your tormentor. It's a very, very powerful concept, very painful concept. It's a profound truth and a deep dive into theodicy, which is the study of a good God, the paradox of a good God and a difficult world, a difficult life. I mean, think about your medical crisis. Where does it come from?
God.
That too comes from God. And when you realize that your medical crisis comes from God, then your solution lies in God. Of course, you need the doctors too. We'll talk about that. But essentially, everything comes from God. And the question is why? And that's where we begin our discourse. We begin our discourse by saying that everything in this world comes from God, whether it's natural or whether it's supernatural. Let's just talk about that for a second. What does natural mean? Natural means what? But how do you define nature? What does nature mean?
It's what is expected based on
What is expected based on precedent, right? Sunrise is natural.
Something we can explain.
Very good. Very good. Misha. Something we can explain. So let's say nature is something that we can explain. Now, we can explain. There are things, though, that we can't explain. What is it that we can explain? Pretty much anything which falls into the realm of the five senses.
night follows day.
If we can see it, you can hear it, you can smell it, you can touch it, you can taste it. If it is able to be grasped by all of the five senses or some of the five senses, this is one way of describing nature. Some of these are mutually exclusive and some are not. One way of defining nature is that which is explainable. That's what Misha says. Another way, which could be different, could be the same, is that which is grasped in the five senses. What then is supernatural? Do you believe in the supernatural?
Yeah.
What is supernatural?
Some
Something that
some force that I can't.
By definition, above.
It's a force.
The above of nature, right?
Above.
Super means above. So supernatural means above nature. So what is an example of something which is supernatural?
The 6-day war.
You mean miraculous events?
Miracles are they?
So miracles. So let's say like a medical miracle or a military miracle, right?
War party in the Red Sea.
An Iranian air attack on Israel twice with zero impact, right?
Beaker bombs. That's supernatural.
Okay, so you say that there's military events that are supernatural. There's also medical events that are supernatural. Are there not only events, but are there items like beings that are supernatural?
Potentially.
I don't know. But
So
weren't the angels supernatural?
so the angels are not necessarily supernatural.
Okay.
Now it's interesting. It's a very like big statement to say that, right? Let me put it to you this way. How about a soul? A soul, S-O-U-L. What is a soul? The word soul in Latin means anima. Anima. Anima in Latin means life. The soul is that which gives life. Energy. Now you, Misha, are a doctor.
Yeah.
Can doctors explain life? Can they explain life? Or do they only say that if you do this, this will happen, and if you do that, then that will happen? But they can't determine who shall. Can doctors determine who will live and who will die? I don't think so. Can they?
Depends on their
Well, as
actions.
soon as
Depends on their actions.
Well, there's actually three, I would say, components.
3 components. Okay, I'm listening.
One, and most important, I would say, is the flow of energy.
Okay. All right, keep it moving. Yeah.
The second one is reproduction.
Is it what?
Reproduction.
Reproduction. Okay.
And the third one is adaptation. That's from physical point of view.
Okay, so I'm just not sure where you're going with this.
But the main thing, in my understanding, is that it's an energy. When energy stops flowing, there is like this very interesting physician from my specialty explains. What's the difference between the dead body and live body?
What is the difference between a dead body and a live body?
Flow of energy.
Flow of energy. Now, why is it that a dead body has no flow of energy and a live body does? How do we explain
The essence.
the essence? What is the essence? What does that mean, the essence?
Soul, it is the
Soul
So the
is
soul, so the soul is,
That's just the
Yes, right.
soul that's energy.
When the energy
It
goes
animates
out,
the body.
the soul leaves the body.
The measurable part.
Huh?
The measurable
okay,
part.
so here's what we're saying. We're saying that there are parts of our lives that are explainable. There are parts of our lives that are explainable, which is, got a headache, you take a Tylenol. You have this heart condition, you take that medicine. things that relate to our bodies generally related to our bodies are associated with nature. But then being able to treat the soul, the life within us, that is supernatural. It's something which we can't yet grasp. What is the soul, for example? The soul is your depression, your joy, your feelings. Your feelings is your soul, by the way. Your intellect. Your soul is life itself. And that is something which, like you say, God's sparkle, a piece of God. That is something which we can't grasp. We can't understand. We can't explain. The only way that we're able to grasp it is by a glimmer of its impact on our body. When it has an impact on our body, that's how we're able to get a little touch, a little feel, a little taste of the soul. But essentially, it's not something you can put into a test tube and say, this is what's going to happen now. Because the soul is not something which we can grasp in the five senses.
Well, it's godly.
It's godly, right? And that's why it's called supernatural, right? It's not a part of this world. It's not a piece of this world, right? You see what I'm saying? It's not a piece of this world. It's the godly soul is essentially a piece of heaven, right? Now, when we talk about God answering us in the time of our distress,
Quick question.
Yeah.
So the godly soul is God.
Yeah.
Isn't the natural soul also?
the natural soul is a far lesser divine energy.
Right, but it still is.
Whereas the godly soul, remember, we have two souls within us. This is foundational Tanya, which is the founding text of Chabad, that everything in this world is created through God's speech, whereas the soul of man was created through God's blowing. What's the difference between speaking and blowing?
Takes a lot more energy.
Takes a lot more energy to blow than it does to speak. The energy infused in creation through God's speech is a very small, low energy, low voltage. So that's what's inside of every existence. It's a very, very small piece of divine energy, what we're going to call natural. Natural is the product of God's speech. But that which is supernatural, like the soul, is a product of God's blowing, which means comes out of God's essence. Just like when you blow from your kishkis. You blow from your deep inside of you, and you get tired quickly after you blow. The blowing that the Torah tells us that God blew the soul into man means that the soul came from God's essence. And that's the reason why the soul is supernatural. The reason it's supernatural is because it is godly and it's not of this world, because it's not captured in the five senses.
But
It's not a
Gentiles
physical being.
have a natural soul. They don't-
So Gentiles have a natural soul as well, absolutely.
They're coming from God too.
Yeah, but it's the other
Lower
level.
energy.
It's a natural soul. They have a natural soul. The unique soul to the Jewish people is the godly soul. Not to say that
No, that's-
the Gentiles don't have,
No, of course that's-
right? I mean, think about what happens in a marriage. In a marriage, a person's essence is infused into their partner, right? It's not racist. It's just that is marital intimacy. That's how we live, right? So when you choose a partner, when you choose your chosen one, you infuse your essence into that person. And that's what happens with, and that's how you give birth to children. In the same way, when God chose us, the Jewish people, God infused his essence into the Jewish people. And that's what it means that he blew the soul, the godly soul, into the Jew. Now, this doesn't mean that a Gentile can't become a Jew. A Gentile can become a Jew, right? Through the process of conversion. And thus their natural soul is upgraded to become a godly soul. But now it's with this introduction that we're able to begin to understand the context of what we're talking about. When we pray to God to answer us in the time of our distresses, because God is the source of life, the source of energy, not only for the natural world, but also for that which is supernatural. Now, we spoke about bodies and souls. So a body is natural, with a soul being supernatural. But then if you look at the earth as well, look at the earth. When you look at the earth, you got a plant, which is natural. The plant is natural. But then there's the energy, that word that Misha used. There's the energy behind the plant, the energy that creates the plant. That is what Chassidus calls supernatural. Call it the soul of the earth. There's the corpus of the earth, and then there's the soul of the earth, which is something that we can't grasp and we can't understand. Let's take a look a little bit in the text to be able to understand this better. So we're on page 261. If you have the text within the in the chat over here, you can follow us along as well. Divine energy creates and vivifies both the lower world with all its creatures and the higher world containing souls and angels. It does so in two ways, providing either physical or spiritual life, right? These two life forces are known as the natural and the supernatural. So God is providing energy to everything. Remember, God is the source of life. Remember, that's very, very important to understand that God is the source of life. Without, science cannot explain where life originated from. So what science tries to do is to kick the can down the road. Well, humans came from amoeba.
Where would the amoeba come from?
Well, where did the amoeba come from?
Yep.
And we're like, we don't know.
Hello.
Science will tell you, we don't know. Science will say, well, there was a Big Bang.
Where'd the Big Bang come from?
The Big Bang comes from Genesis chapter 1.
Right.
That's where the Big Bang comes from. But it's quite fascinating. Just remember this. Aristotle, for 1,800 years, Aristotle was the gold standard of science. And Aristotle believed emphatically that the world always existed. The world always existed. Right? And the rabbis are ridiculed for saying that the world is created. And the Torah was ridiculed for saying that the world is created. And Aristotle's belief, the consequences of his belief led to the conclusion that God cannot control the world. Because just like God is forever, and Aristotle, by the way, did believe in God. He did. Just like the world, that God exists forever, so the world exists forever. And that's Aristotle said, that the God cannot intervene or overrule or override the events in this world. And you shouldn't pray to God when you have a problem, because how's God going to solve your problem? It's like there's two gods, God and the universe. But that theory was debunked 100 years ago when scientists agreed unanimously in the Big Bang. Now, we have to understand that the Big Bang is entirely consistent with the narrative of creation. It's entirely consistent with just one difference, just without identifying who is on the other side of the Big Bang. They're just saying that there was an explosion, and that explosion led to life. Mazel tov. But even scientists will agree that life doesn't happen spontaneously without a cause. An effect doesn't happen without a prior cause. So when the Torah tells us that when the Torah tells us that God created the world, that is the other side of the same coin of scientists telling us about the Big Bang. And if you look at the first letter of the Torah is the bet. The bet, which is Bereshit, which is open on three sides. Sorry, it's closed on three sides, and it's open on the left side. Now in Hebrew, we read from right to left, which means the left side of the letter is the front of the letter. The left side. In English, the right side of the letter is the front. In Hebrew, the left side of the letter is the front, because what the Torah is intimating to us is that I've given you the ability to understand from henceforth on, but that which comes before this moment, above, below, and prior, you have no access to. This is the point of logic. From this point and prior is all faith. And that is the difference between nature and supernatural. From the moment of creation, we can understand, we can appreciate, we can perceive. But from before that moment, we have no ability to understand. Yes, Chuck.
So if God preceded everything and created everything, are we allowed to ask, was God created? How was God created?
Okay, so an interesting question you ask.
Or did God create
is
himself?
is if fine. So you say fine. I'll be scientific. You'll say I'll be scientific, and I'll say that the world was created by a force which had life in it. And what is that force that had life in it? She's a tree of life to all who grasp hold of her. Talking about the Torah, God's Torah. Mm-hmm. So you say, fine, okay, God is the creator. God is behind the Big Bang. Mazel tov, very nice. But now comes the philosopher and he says, but who created God?
Is that a fair question?
Of course it's a fair question. Any question is a fair question. It's like Mickey says, the only stupid question is a question that wasn't asked. So what do you think is the answer to that question? Mark, what do you think is the answer to that question? God created everything, Mazel tov, but who created God?
God created himself. It was God's supernatural. Doesn't
God created himself.
I think God always was.
Oh.
God was,
God
is,
was,
and always will be. I don't know
Right.
right.
I don't know.
Adon Olam. Let's open up Adon Olam. Adon Olam Asher Malach. Let's see what it says then. Adon Olam. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzur Nivra. Lord of the universe who reigned before anything was created. At that time when by his will all things were made, then was his name proclaimed king. And after all things shall cease to be, even the sun has got a time limit, expiration date. The awesome one will reign alone. He was, he is, and he will always be in glory. He is one, and there is no other to compare to him, to consort with him. Without beginning. You know what that means, without beginning? He did not create himself.
He's always been there.
Because he's always been there. Beli reshit, beli reshit, beli tachlit. Without a beginning and without an end, the power and dominion belong to him. You know what this means, folks? This means we can't understand this because we're like, hello. We can only understand stuff within the frame of reference called time.
Yep.
There's no such thing as that which is like beyond time. You can't be no such thing as always was, always is, and always will be. You can't do that. That's against the rules of the game. But that's what we're learning today. The difference between the natural and the supernatural. The natural and the supernatural. The natural is that which is subject to the rules of the frame of reference of this universe. It starts after the bet. It's understandable. It's within the rules of engagement of time, space, math, logic, five senses, all the rules that begin the first day of creation. But before that, there's no time, there's no space, there's no logic, there's no reason, there's no rhyme, there's no senses, there's no nature, and that's why those rules don't apply. So you can't apply rules to God that apply to yourself. It's like imagine like an earthworm over here, trying to understand what we're talking about. So the earthworm will be like, they must be talking about, I don't know, what do earthworms eat? I don't know.
Dirt.
Yeah, they must be talking about dirt. This meeting of humans must be about dirt because the earthworm thinks that we all live in his frame of reference. That's why it's an earthworm. But if you're able to open your mind to realize that there are things beyond your grasp, then the earthworm might say, you know what, I have no idea what they're talking about, but it's beyond my ability to fathom. I know that whatever I know, they're not talking about. And that's how we look at God. Without a beginning, without end, power and dominion belong to him. He is my God and my ever-living Redeemer. Now we can understand why he's my ever-living Redeemer. Because he was there before anything ever existed. He was there before the problem. In fact, he created the problem. And when I understand that he created the problem, what happens is that I say, you know what? If I'm going to turn to someone for help, I'm going to go straight to the CEO, to the master of the universe, the Redeemer, the strength of my lot in time of distress. Now we understand why we turn to him in time of distress. He is my banner and my refuge, my portion on the day I call. Into his hand I entrust my spirit when I sleep and when I awake. And with my soul, my body too. The Lord is with me, I shall not fear. Look at those lines. With my soul, my body too. My body is the natural part of my life, but my soul is the supernatural part of my life. With everything, I turn to God because that is the nature of God. I mean, it's a paradox to talk about the nature of God. Admittedly, God doesn't have a nature because God supersedes and overrides and creates nature. But at least we're able to get an answer to a very, very honest question. So who created God? The answer is nobody. God is life itself. God is energy itself. Now, admittedly, I do think God needs a new PR firm, and we are working on it, on rebranding God. Because, God just doesn't do good in the marketing department. People think of God as some vengeful, conniving, nasty, moody, bipolar being, At best, he's like a butler to us, that's annoying, like a bad butler. We ask him to do stuff and he only does it like 10% of the time. So we're like, you normally fire such an employee, but you can't fire a God. It's like a technical problem, right? So yeah, we look at God and we're like, what the heck is going on? What kind of God is this? But when you reframe your perception of God and you understand that God is essentially the essence of life. That's what God is. God is the essence of life. God is not your butler. God is not your messenger boy. there to just fulfill your whims and wishes. And God is not a angry cop who's waiting to pull you over and give you a ticket for stepping out of line. But rather, when we begin to process that God is the source of all life, God is the beginning, God is the end. He always was, he always is, and he always will be. By the way, that's his name. His name, if you look at this verse, we say, may the Lord, the name for Lord is Havaya. In English, can't translate that. But the word Havaya is the four-letter name of God. It's actually the Yud, followed by Hey, followed by a Vav, followed by Hey. That four-letter name of God is actually made up of three words, which means past, present, and future. Haya means was. Hove is, Yihye will be. So God, when you say this word Yud Ke Vav Ke, we only pronounce it Havaya. We rearrange the letters because you're not allowed to say the name of God in its original form because it's like disrespectful. It's like you shouldn't call your parents by their first name. So God's name is timelessness, which really answers your question in his very name. You say, who created God? Well, the answer is, my name is timelessness. And if my name is timelessness, was, is, and will be, then that tells you a heck of a lot about me. I mean, not about me, about God, right? That tells you a lot about God. That God is always. God is forever. God is infinite. God is unlimited. So if we can reframe our perception of God to understand that God is not some, I don't know, some optional elective for people that don't play golf. But rather, God is the source of life. It changes our perception. It changes our approach to God. Instead of saying, God, I'll deal with you one day when I have time for you. You say, actually, I need you now because I'm in trouble. Because I don't have time. That's why I need you now. Who else are you going to turn to when you're in trouble? When you got a problem, when you're facing a crisis, when you're in a war? You're going to turn to the source of life itself. Because guess what? The source of life wants a relationship with you. And the source of life is telling you, listen, I'm going to drive you nuts so I can get your attention. And when I get your attention, I'm going to give you what you need. Yeah.
This is hypothetical, but just wondering from what you're talking about, God, aren't we, I mean, as Mark Penteller, Rabbi Vigler, and all the people out there, aren't we kind of like boring to God because he has so many things he's dealing with? Aren't we like, oh, we're a little...
So you're saying, if God is so great, why would a God have time for little me? So I'll say this to you. I mean, it's an interesting question, and you're right. You're right. I mean, there is such a verse. There is such a verse that says in Torah, if you will be righteous, do you think it's going to make a difference? If you sin, you think it's going to matter? There is such a verse in Torah. But just remember, you can't read Torah like that, like one-dimensional. You have to understand that there's multiple layers. Just like you have multiple layers to your personality, God has multiple layers. Essentially, your question is correct. That God doesn't have imagine you're like a microscopic blip on a radar, which is 1 million, billion, gazillion times bigger than the universe. Like, who cares, right? But at the same time, then I tell you that even though there's 7-point-something billion people on the face of the earth, there's 11 people that I'm extremely focused on. You know who they are?
Your kids.
My children. You know why? Because they're my kids. And you know what you are?
Your children.
You're God's child. In fact, you're his one and only.
0.2%.
But you are his one and only child, and he cares about you deeply. And so that's very, very important to understand. And in fact, I want you to know something very, very important. Chassidus explains to us that the reason we lay tefillin, well, something happens when we study Torah and when we lay tefillin. This comes from the discourse that the bar mitzvah boys say, Isa b'medrash tefillin. When you study Torah and when you lay tefillin, what you're doing is that you're initiating a mirror reaction to God. What is Torah? Torah is God's attention. It's his wisdom, right? Torah is God's wisdom. So what happens when we read Torah? You direct God's attention to you. That's what you do. When you study Torah, like we're doing right now, God is like, oh, there they are. I see them. Like we red flagged the radar system. He's like, oh, they're in Palm Beach Gardens. Oh, that's actually a global broadcast. Nice. We have 65 live students, right, watching. So it's God on the radar. He says, oh, there's a live Torah class, and we bring God's attention to that Torah class. When the Jewish people complained to God and they said, listen, God, we'd love to study Torah, but we don't have time. We got to make a living. Why would they like to study Torah? What's so important about studying Torah? Chassidus explains, we want to study Torah to survive because we need your affection, we need your attention, we need you to focus on us, because if you don't focus on us, what's going to happen? We're left to the, we're left to the mercy of our neighbors, and that ain't going to be pretty. So God, we need you to focus on us. What's going to happen if the shepherd forgets about the sheep? They might get devoured. So the sheep says, hey, shepherd, I'm here. Stay with me. That's what Torah study is. Torah study is remember, when we're praying, we're talking to God. When we're learning Torah, God is talking to us. So when we study Torah, we're bringing God's attention. We're bringing God's attention back to us. When the Jews complained to God and they said, God, we don't have time to study Torah, he says, okay, I'll give you a shortcut. Lay tefillin. And when you lay tefillin, what's going to happen is that you're going to redirect God's attention. It's like a shortcut method of getting God's attention. And every day that we lay tefillin, this is what it says about the tefillin, and the nations of the land will see the name of God upon you, and they will fear you. And the nations of the land will see the name of God upon you. It's talking about the tefillin of the head. When a Jew wears a tefillin in Jupiter, Florida, or in Wyoming, or in Auckland, New Zealand, it doesn't matter where. When a Jew lays tefillin, he brings the defense, the protection, the divine intervention of God Almighty into the theater of war for Jewish people, wherever they may be. So the tefillin is a divine shortcut for God's attention. That's what's so important about laying tefillin every day. It works only for 24 hours. So therefore, when we understand the power of the tefillin, we understand the answer to your question. Because yes, you're right, God is infinite. No, wearing tzitzis is not the same, David. This is a unique, special blessing for tefillin, unique to tefillin. Tzitzis is other blessings. Interesting, we get a comment from Lottie here. Someone has made the books good looking behind the rabbi. Thank you. So it's noted and observed. Thank you very much.
Is that burger?
Nope.
No.
Let me see if there's any interesting comments coming in here. So just to conclude over here, folks, I just want to conclude by saying that we're starting to understand the reason why we would even pray this prayer. You got a problem, talk to your banker. You got a medical crisis, talk to your doctor. You got a war, talk to your government. Right? No. You got a problem, talk to God. Psalms chapter 20, verse 2. May the Lord Havaya answer you on the day of distress. May the name of God of Jacob fortify you. Because God is not just another player, maybe a bigger player in the field. He's not. God is the energy behind everything. God is the source of life. Behind that which is natural and behind that which is supernatural. Behind the body and behind the soul. Behind the physical and behind the spiritual. Behind the understandable parts of our lives and behind the non-understandable parts of our lives. We'll be developing this theme over the next few next few weeks. We have the source material here. I encourage you to read it, folks. We typically study this on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8:30 a.m. So please join us for that. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. But today's Torah study is actually dedicated. Today's Torah study is dedicated in memory of, Stephanie Marmer's father, Bert Stolman Hirsch Leib Ben Benjamin, on the occasion of his yahrzeit last week. May today's Torah study, global impact, serve to elevate his soul in heaven on the occasion of today's Torah study. Thank you very much. If you'd like to dedicate Torah study, you can do so online at jewishgardens.com/donate. That's jewishgardens.com/donate. Thank you very much.